Going to continue the baseball talk right now. Joining us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline, Karl Ravech of Baseball Tonight. You can catch Karl and the gang with Baseball Tonight Sunday Night Countdown presented by Chevrolet pregame show with Mark Teixeira and Tim Kirchin from Citi Field at 7 p.m. on ESPN. If you're not near your television, of course, you can catch John Chiambi and Chris Singleton on the call on ESPN Radio right here on 97.3 ESPN with Sunday Night Baseball. It's the Mets and the Yankees this weekend. Karl, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. You know, for me, with interleague play, I know some people are not a huge fan of it, but to me, when you get the Yankees and the Mets, to me, this is what interleague play was made for. It's that regional rivalry, that inner city divide.
Yeah, I mean, if we could limit it to that, it would be great, but that wouldn't necessarily be fair to the Mets because they're always playing the Yankees, and if you could sort of use those rivalries, I think it would be better than the sort of steady play of interleague ball throughout the course of the season. And I think we're going to head there. I think eventually we're going to have 32 teams, and as a result, you won't have to have interleague, but perhaps for just the rivalry series. Yeah, I mean, you know it, Yankees and Mets, there's something unique and special about it because they both call the same city home. And one team is playing great, the other's lost 6 in a row, and there's discussion about what the Mets should do and how far the Yankees can go. So it's always interesting. What makes it more intriguing are the people that pitch for the Mets and the players that play for the Yankees.
The Yankees are 40-18, but the record looks good, Karl, but the team overall has been a little inconsistent. You know, we heard all about Sanchez and Stanton and Judge coming into this season, but you know, those guys have struggled at times this year.
I know. It's great to be inconsistent and be 40-19, isn't it? I mean, that's the luxury that's a luxury that those guys can afford. You know, there's no reason to be worried. The only thing that you would be, at least from my perspective, concerned with would be their pitching. And their pitching, thanks to Sonny Gray recently in his last outing, makes you think that things are going to be okay. They're going to score. Stanton is going to eventually be more consistent. Sanchez will. There's nothing there to worry about. It's not as if they're too old. So it's funny that players or the people in New York consider 40-19, and what we worry about is inconsistency. It's like worrying about the Astros or currently worrying about the Red Sox. The only team that needs to be worried about in this series is the Mets.
Before we get to the Mets, I want to get your perspective. You know, your former guy used to work with ESPN, Aaron Boone, first year as the Yankees manager. You know, what is your thoughts on Aaron, how he's handled all this? Because, I mean, you're talking about throwing a guy into the deep end. He didn't just go to any team. He went to the Yankees to be a manager.
Right. Well, I mean, the blessing and the curse of that is he went to the Yankees, and that comes with all sorts of challenges and brighter lights, spotlights on him. But he also went to the Yankees with a lineup and a talent level that exceeds any other in Major League Baseball. They're as good as the Astros, they're as good as the Red Sox, and they're as good as any team in the National League. So it's one of those things where you know what the expectations are, but providing the players play to their level, they're going to be 40-19 or 20 games over 500 and play in October. So it's one of those deals where he, to me, is among the luckiest men on the planet for getting that job and not getting a job where there's a rebuild going on or anything else. And he's more than capable of it. I didn't have any doubt about his lack of managerial experience because he's been around managers his entire life. He grew up in clubhouses. He obviously played for many years. He then went into the booth and was talking to managers and bench coaches about strategies and a variety of other things. So there's no question that Aaron Boone is capable of doing this, and he's clearly proven it so far. It's a very close-knit clubhouse. In a lot of times when you have guys who aren't performing to their best of their ability, you tend to lose that. That's not the case there. There's all sorts of smiles and good vibes going around that clubhouse.
Speaking of a manager and a first-time job who's been a little unlucky, on the other side is the Mets. I mean, Karl, are the Mets cursed? I mean, they can't stay healthy. There's always a guy going to the DL. I mean, Mickey Callaway, I'm wondering how long his hair is going to last on his head.
Well, he's got a guy who is bald already that he used to be the bench coach for with Terry Francona, so he knows that might be part of the job. You know, the frustrating part from, I'm sure, Met fans' perspective is it seems to be like a washing machine. You wash, rinse, repeat, and they just keep repeating. At least it feels like they keep repeating similar things, as you said, injuries and whether it be trainers that misdiagnose or players that go on the DL or shouldn't be on the DL. And unfortunately, it's something that does continue to sort of rear its head, and you wish it wouldn't, because I think and I've been pretty bullish on the Mets, when they have a lineup that's healthy and they have that staff and a bullpen, I think that they were, I mean, I had them as a wild card team. So I'm bullish on where the Mets are when they're all together and healthy, and I think, the first 3 weeks of the season prove that. So I understand the concern, I understand the frustration, but I'm one of those who would not be in the market to trade currently DeGrom or Syndergaard, because I think they're unique talents, and if you ever want to be good again, you keep those two guys.
You think the Mets can find their way to maybe fight their way up the standings and maybe be buyers?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think they have the ability to do that. I think in their case, unlike Yankees, unlike Red Sox, unlike Cubs perhaps, everything needs to go right, meaning players can't get hurt. They don't have, to me, the depth that some of these top-tier teams have, and I think that's been their problem. When they get hurt, they really struggle. The Red Sox have been without Betts for a while. They haven't struggled at all. We've seen the Yankees overcome injuries, and they're playing two kids. Hasn't affected them at all. So I think for the Mets, there is very little margin for error, and we're seeing here the last 2 weeks, when they have little margin for error, they're getting exposed. But I do think when they are a together club and all in the field, they're as good as any team in that league.
Sticking in the NL East, I want to get your perspective on the Phillies, because I know when you were on last time with Rich, it was early in the season, and you guys talked about Gabe Kapler and the Phillies. Now further into the season, what is your perspective on Gabe and the Phillies? This Phillies team, they've had some nice moments this year, but the offense has also struggled. They're only scoring just over 3 runs a game in their last 21 games. So now that the season is further along, what is your perspective?
Yeah, I would say with youth comes this sort of inconsistent play, and I think that's what we're seeing with the Phillies. I do think that the Phillies being linked to Manny Machado make a lot of sense. I think the Phillies and the Braves are clearly teams in the National League East who are both on the upswing. I don't think that they are there yet, but I think they're on the upswing. And I like what the Phillies have as a core. I love Aaron Nola. I think Arrieta is that veteran presence that's why I wouldn't trade both Syndergaard and DeGrom. I would keep one if the Mets ever get into that situation where they got to trade or decide they need to trade. Both, I think you trade one. So I'm encouraged by the athleticism, but I do think with that youth comes inconsistency. You'll see that with both Philadelphia and Atlanta the rest of the way.
Did you find it intriguing how Kapler kind of turned the whole Jake Arrieta criticism on its head? How he came out and said, I'm happy the guy's not content. I wouldn't want my guys to be content. Did you feel like Kapler basically took that whole story and just threw it on its head?
Yeah, I think one thing that the consistency between Boone, Cora, Kapler, Callaway, for the most part, they're good communicators. They understand that part of it, and I don't mean just with the media. I mean within their own clubhouse. So the idea that he's able to turn that, look, Gabe Kapler was getting fired after the first week. I mean, it was a disaster there with some of the moves that he was making and decisions that he was or wasn't acting on. So I think his ability to turn that around stems from the team's ability to win games, But I think that he, like the other guys that are new to this job, are very savvy that way. And I don't want to say that he can spin things, but those guys know how to spin things, and they've succeeded. All 4 of those guys, with the exception in New York now of Mickey, because the team is struggling, they know how to deal with crises within the clubhouse and outside of it, and will generally, and I hope this maintains itself, is to side with player versus media.
One more question for you, Karl. I appreciate your time here on a Friday here on 97.3 ESPN. Cole Hamels has been the subject of a lot of trade rumors. People who are Yankee fans are like, we want Cole. People who are Philly fans are like, no, bring him home. Everyone seems to have a theory on where he could go. What is your perspective on what Cole Hamels' future may be at the trade deadline?
Well, it's the sort of the Kenny Rogers thing here. Like, can Cole Hamels, in a new uniform in a different environment, sort of turn things around? Is he capable of doing that? And I think his last start there with his inconsistency leads that to be a question that's unanswered. But I do think that given what appear to be a very small list of potential pitchers, he'd be a great one because of his experience in the postseason and his experience in those markets. I think Philadelphia is a bit of a better fit, to be perfectly honest with you, than I do New York with Cole Hamels.
You can catch Karl as he hosts Baseball Tonight Sunday Night Countdown, presented by Chevrolet with Mark Teixeira and Tim Kirchin, Sunday night from Citi Field at 7 p.m. on ESPN. Or if you're near your radio, you can catch John Sciambi and Chris Singleton. We'll have a call on ESPN Radio right here on 97.3 ESPN. Yankees and Mets this weekend. The Subway Series revived. Karl, appreciate your time and enjoy the weekend.
Thanks very much for having me on. I'll talk to you soon.